Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Sport Limerick Soccer Podcast. Delighted to be joined again by Jason and Noel O'Connor. And to start with yourself, Noel, the first Portugal for us this evening will obviously be the Munster Derby victory for Treaty United senior men's side against Cork City at Turner's Cross last week. It's fair to say, Noel, on the balance of play in the first 50 to 55 minutes of that game, you could only see one result. It's amazing, really, that Treaty came out with a 3-2 win, because you would have thought a draw would have been hard to come by, judging on the balance of play in the early stages.
Yeah, well, from a Treaty point of view, it's unbelievable 3 points. From a Cork point of view, I think it's a bit of a disaster of a night. I mean, I felt at half time, thought they were excellent. They were a different side to the side that we saw at the Marcus Field. Their ball speed, so many players dominating around the pitch. Dylan McGlade was terrorising Treaty down the Cork left-hand side. The two midfielders, Morrissey, were dominating in the middle. Stephen Beattie was very, very strong. And I thought that O'Brien Whitmarsh was looking dangerous as well, and the bit of pace from Collins. So it looked like there was only going to be one winner at that stage. They created a lot of chances, just were a bit sloppy that last, hitting the target, a couple of shots over the bar, some good chances from set plays. And then the penalty for Treaty, it certainly was against the run of play and certainly was a penalty, but, you'd be tearing your hair out if you were involved with Cork. A kind of a childish handball. There was two of them, actually. Two of them were definitely penalties, but, you're just looking at your defenders. And I suppose the real difference between the two teams, and we've said it before, is how much the two Treaty centre-halves enjoy defending, yet the two Cork City centre-halves, they seem to be more interested in passing the ball to the full-back or passing the ball into a midfielder and, just making these real schoolboy errors then in terms of not closing down the ball, not closing down players. And Treaty, they took every little half chance they got in the game. And as you said, it looked like it would have been a bad night for Cork had they got a draw, and they ended up with nothing, but certainly a brilliant 3 points for Treaty United.
Certainly the case, Jason. And once again, we saw the character that when Treaty had a sniff of anything, of getting a point, that, they fought for every ball, even, not playing well. And in the second half in particular, one of the things we mentioned, we thought that Tommy Barrett might tweak the formation, or whether we thought he would or not, he did tweak the formation and went for two up front, 4-2-2 or a 4-1-1, as you might interpret it as well. Jason, how do you think that formation fared out, firstly, I suppose, and secondly, happy to just see the change anyway to something more attacking?
Yeah, look, it was hard to figure out the formation, really, Adrian, to be honest with you. You look at Cork and that was very much a 4-4-2 with obviously Whitmarsh and Cian Murphy up top. You had two strikers in the Treaty team. That was as close as it is to 4-4-2. McKevitt looked a little bit confused at times in the first half, especially. It looked like he was meant to be dropping in. But if you're talking about dropping in, then are you talking about a 4-4-2? For me, if you play a 4-4-2 and you want to defend with it, you ask the two strikers to shield them balls going into the centre of the park and force the opposition to go wide and let them go down the sides and then push the ball and push the opponents further and further towards the touchline. That didn't happen. Alec Byrne was dominating the play in the middle of the park in the first half. He got far too much ball for me. There didn't seem to be much cohesion between Reid and McKevitt defensively. And at times when the ball went forward, one of them then was kind of isolated. So bit of work to do on that for me, bit better organisation, and I don't want to be too negative because I'll agree with Noel, it was a fantastic result, but the formation didn't work for me. I had reservations last week about 4-4-2 that they'd be open, and I think they were very open, Adrian. You look at chances created, and Noel said it there. There was 4 clear chances for me inside the box, excellent chances for Cork City. Cian Coleman had one on 30 minutes, 49 minutes. Alec Byrne is a sitter, as far as I'm concerned. Dylan McGlade went very, very close as well, 67 minutes. And then in injury time, Alec Byrne again, another good chance, So you can't really say the
I also
formation.
feel aggrieved, Jason, about the penalty, I suppose. It looked like a stone wall from where I was, that Cusack, because it just happened previously and I didn't think it was a penalty about a minute and a half, 2 minutes previously. And then O'Brien Whitmarsh went in again with Shane Cusack, and he did look a bit more guilty on the second occasion from my angle anyway.
100%. I'll be the same as you, Adrian, but that backs up the point Noel made last week about people whinging and moaning about penalty kicks and not being given. There was no one moaning this week. You were the only one there to do the interview, so that was probably the reason behind that. But they even themselves out over the season, But as I said, based on chances created, the formation didn't work. They got the rub of the green, and I suppose if anyone deserves the rub of the green, it is Treaty for their work rate, for their character that's been mentioned, So we don't want to be taking anything away from it, but analysing at the same time that 4-4-2 isn't the way to go for me.
Certainly so. And Noel, we had one of a person who'd be fairly close to your own heart on the podcast, the special edition of the podcast last week of Sport Limerick in George O'Callaghan. It's fair to say the interview I did with George made you two guys here look like saints with his forthright opinions on certain issues, including Cork City. Noel, he was very downbeat about the way it went, even with Joe Gamble and Neil Fenn there. Also, very, very, very critical of the team now, saying there's no fight, there's no hunger in Cork. To be fair to them, that didn't seem to be the case in the first, as we said, the first hour at least, and through the whole game, to be fair to them, the other night. But Colin Healy must be tearing whatever little hair he has left out to see how am I going to change this. Now, they are being linked very strongly with a move for Mikey Drennan, I believe, as well, to come back into the fray. I do certainly think they do need an out-and-out goal scorer, all right.
Yeah, look, I mean, if they had their shooting boots on Friday night, they might have got 5 goals. I just lost a bit on your about George being critical, but his podcast certainly went down a storm anyway, judging by the amount of people who were talking to me about it in the last couple of days. I kind of missed his energy around the place, actually. But I mean, look, we have touched on it here. It must be very hard for the likes of those guys to take, to see Cork in the position that they were in. I mean, even through the bad days of not having money and the whole crash coming like before, in 08 and 09, even though they were struggling, like they were still a strong Premier team who'd get results, But it's just probably going to be a difficult week for Cork in terms of, I'm sure Colin Healy said, well, what we need to do, like to get a winner, to get results that our performance deserved, which was last week. But I think they just need, again, it's always back to the simple things, back to basics. I don't think, and I'd agree with George from the view, the defenders don't seem to have that real killer instinct in terms of defending, about, not giving the opposition an inch and a chance. They were very open. They were very slow to close down the ball. They're kind of looking at each other to see who's going to do it. And unless that changes, well, they are going to, concede sloppy goals. I said that. I saw the goal that they conceded against Athlone, and that's a long time ago now. Just no one really reacting to a simple ball across the pitch, and, just looking like they're asleep on the job. And they're giving away 2 penalties and another soft goal at home. And if they keep on doing that, they're certainly not going to climb the table. But if they can cut those errors out, and it's looking on the attack side, they seem to be fairly okay now. But he's got to just, talk to his defence and just get a better reaction out of them in terms of being better defenders and being a bit more mean. Because Treaty, in fairness, have, their whole season has been about that real fight, in terms of not conceding, crowding areas, everyone getting behind the ball, throwing their bodies on the line, some good saves from the keeper, and then, getting half a chance or a chance in getting a goal, and then fighting tooth and nail to hold on to that win. And it's probably something that Cork can certainly learn from Treaty.
Definitely. And Jason, there was a few individual performances there the other night as well, which would be pleasing. Obviously for Kieran Hanley, after he missed the penalty against Cove, he's got 2 penalties. He's now the outright top scorer for the team now, with 4 goals. Always good for a striker, especially considering he had struggled in previous weeks. for form. That's just one. I also felt, even though it did seem like the midfield were overrun at times in the first 55-60, that Callum McNamara put in a very mature shift for the team. And it's just something that we picked up on a couple of weeks ago, Jason, off camera. Actually, we were speaking about the fact that now you have Jack Lynch, who hopefully will be back. He picked up a light concussion, I think, the night before the game. I only found out when I got there myself. On the eve of the game, he'll be back, you would assume. You had Mark Walsh, who came off the bench later on as well, just to make an appearance. Callum McNamara is there. Clyde O'Connell's there. We also will have Sean McSweeney come back into fray. So all of a sudden, an area where we were very worried about maybe at the start of the season, before the season kicked off, there's competition there now, Jason, for places inside there.
Oh, definitely, Adrian. Callum McNamara has been a revelation. I said previously that he came with a very, very good reputation from my colleague Dennis Hines, who knows every player in Clare from a very young age up until, I suppose, they stopped playing, and he recommended Callum very, very highly, and he's been proved right. I think he's been excellent, and I've said that now for a number of weeks. Mark Walsh, before his injury, and that'll be interesting to discuss. Obviously, that injury came against Shelbourne, and now he could possibly be back in with a shout of playing against Shelbourne this week. So that could be interesting. But before his injury, he was the standout midfielder for me from a defensive point of view. You'd expect Jack Lynch, obviously, as captain to play. And Sean McSweeney will always play, in my opinion, as the third midfielder or that second striker, whatever way you want to look at it, when he is fit and available. Then obviously you have Clyde, and listen, important now to note, I was quick enough to point out about his bookings. So no booking for Clyde against Cork. And you could see by his demeanour, and you could see from a couple of challenges, he kind of held himself back. So it's now finding that balance with, I suppose, staying within the rules of the game and not letting it affect your performance, because it wasn't one of his better games. You quite rightly said Callum was excellent in there. And they suffered without that third midfielder, and they suffered a little bit without the protection that the front two should give in a 4-4-2. As I said, they should be shielding centrally to stop balls going in there. But great to see, I suppose, Sean Gearns at the back again, as Noel said. But back to your original point, there's fierce competition now for places in the middle of the field, and I know some people were talking or whispering about Shane Duggan coming back, but I wouldn't see any benefit in that, looking at the profile of the team and the performances they've put in. Would there be any room or point in bringing in another midfielder? I don't think so. The competition is fierce in there. And suddenly players are grown into this league, Adrian, which is great to see.
Yeah, certainly. As I said, it was a position maybe we flanked as being worried about, and obviously not as worried at all about it now, considering the performance of those individual players that we mentioned. Noel, it's about time now we moved on to the big game with Shelbourne, the unbeaten Shelbourne, Friday night, Markets Field, first against third. Obviously, Shelbourne way out in front. That win was absolutely crucial on a number of levels for Treaty, because you had lost to Galway. If they had lost to Cork, you're going into a game against Shelbourne, then with a slight bit of pressure saying, oh well, we don't want to be going in and having 3 defeats on the bounce then. But now after getting that win, it really is a totally free shot for Tommy Barrett and his team. So it promises to be a really entertaining evening with Shelbourne coming.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how they approach it, and you're right, it is a free shot. And Tommy pointed out actually that the last team to take points from Shelbourne is actually Treaty, and now we've got a full round of games. So it's back to that, and Treaty are at home. In fairness to Shelbourne, they've certainly got the winning habit. The couple of games that have been very tight, obviously the one last week, they were supposed to be very poor in that game and snuck out with a 1-0 win over Cabinteely. We know that a 1-0 win over Shelbourne. So from the point of view that they're not lashing in maybe 3 or 4 goals at the moment, would certainly give Treaty a chance. And the other thing is, the longer a team goes on unbeaten, well then, the more likely is that they are going to come unstuck. It is hard enough to keep on winning and winning and winning and winning, and at times. So from that point of view, I think there's a chance for Treaty. I would agree with Jason. I thought that they were very open, and he's right about the midfield. They were so dominant. Cork, you wouldn't like to do the same thing against Shelbourne, because you feel that if Shelbourne get in around the Treaty penalty box, they're not going to be knocking the ball over the bar or kicking the ball into the keeper's hands. You know, they're going to be a lot more clinical than that. So there's going to be a little bit of thought about how they are going to set up. And with all these extra midfielders come in, I would expect them to go back to a kind of a 4-3-3, which would be a 4-5-1 out of possession. I did think in the second half that they did tweak it a little bit and went for more of a 4-4-1-1, because I felt that Reds, he positioned himself centrally, and when they were clearing the ball, they were actually looking for him as to kind of flick it on, and you did see a bit more work from McKevin in trying to pick up the second ball off him. So there was a small bit more structure about it in the second half, but I think there's going to have to be a lot more next Friday night. But look, it's a game to really look forward to. On paper you couldn't see anything else, only a Shelbourne win, but this is Treaty, and they've confounded in a lot of matches. They'll be buoyed up with last week, and you'd have to give them a bit of a shake in it.
You'd certainly hope so anyway. And Jason, Noel mentioned it there about possible changes to the approach, and that was something I was going to pick up on with you as well. Do you expect changes in personnel and formation from Tommy in a bid to prevent Shelbourne on Friday night?
Well, I don't think they'll be as open as they were last week. I agree with Noel. I think that would be, very, very dangerous. Noel mentioned it there, and I'd echo it. You give up them chances to the likes of Maddie and Brennan and these people, and they're going to punish you. Michael O'Connor as well. There's no doubt they'll take them chances, But you said it there, Adrian. You looked at the game last week, and both of us were watching it, and we couldn't see Treaty getting anything out of it. So it'd be slow to kind of bet against them in the sense, but I think you'll have to have a little rethink about it, definitely. I say it week in, week out, the back four. Obviously, Shane Cusick will probably be in goal if Tyga still is injured, but the back four picks itself at this stage. Callum McNamara is picking himself at this stage. Red is going to play. There's no doubt about that. So that leaves then a couple of spots up for grabs. Will Mark Walsh come back in? Is he ready for a start? Probably not. So you'd probably expect to see Clyde in there, and you look at the two wingers, we'll call them wingers, but they're not wingers. They don't really offer you a whole pile going forward as in relation to crosses and chance creation. So possibly you could bring them in a little bit narrower, if you did want to persist with McKevin up there with Red, you could ask the two wingers out of possession to be narrow and stop an overload in midfield and give you an extra man in there, forced to play wide and then be shuffling out, I suppose, to try overturn it. So you could go that way with the 4-4-2, Adrian. We talk about tweaking it, and when you're dealing with players at this level, you don't have to spend hours and hours on the training pitch. If you give them slight, direct instructions in and out of possession of the ball, things can be tweaked easily, and work off last week and just give a couple of corrections. So, no, I wouldn't see too many changes this week. I wouldn't really, and I suppose, look, Tommy doesn't have too many options. When you looked at the bench last week, nice to see Ronan Geary on the bench, an under-19s player, and who I'd be familiar with from the Emerging Talent Programme. He can play wide right or he can play right back. Definitely has potential. He's not ready for a start. There's no doubt about that. So I suppose, will Jack Lynch be back? If Jack is back, he'll definitely go into the team, probably next to Callum. And then the decision is, do you leave out Clyde and do you persist with Red and McKevin as a two? So they're the kind of questions Tommy has to look at, but it's a free shot. No one has beaten Shelbourne, and you look at the other fixtures at Lone and Cabinteely, it's great that they're playing each other this week as well. So there's no major pressure at all when you look at the gap. 7 points between Treaty and 6th position. So there's room there to have a little go, Adrian. So why not?
Yeah, absolutely. I echo those words anyway. Noel, obviously you've got the further easing of restrictions will now allow 200 people attend the Markets Field this Friday night. I have to say, I noticed with the 200 in Cork, there was a very vocal Cork crowd. Now, Tommy did mention the fact that there was a few jars and some of them in the corner of the ground at Turner's Cross, which would have helped them be more vocal in some cases. But obviously, that will also help.
Happen in the Markets Field.
Sorry?
that would never happen in Marcus Field. You wouldn't have anyone with a few jars of them up there. Like,
yeah, I know. I heard Jerry O'Dees will be promoting themselves before the game because they are sponsoring the match. But no, it's obviously means that we're hoping for obviously a bit better atmosphere as well that we've been used to, which you hope that the Treaty players will cling on to and push forward with.
Yeah, look, it's all good. Look, we're all mad to go up there. As I said, I saw the second half. It was great to be up there for the Galway match. I'm hoping to be there on Friday night. And look, 200 is great, and we're looking forward to the days when there might be 2,000 and one of those playoff games. But I'm sure the atmosphere will help. It certainly won't hinder Shelburne. They won't worry about playing against 200 or 2,000 or wherever. I'm sure they like going to places where there's a bit of atmosphere as well. But look, it augurs well for the future, and we're all mad to see live games now. So we'll be looking forward to that. I think myself, in terms of the team selection, I think on balance, Jason is right. I think Red is going to start, and I would expect if Jack Lynch is fit to play, you will have that three in the middle. I think of Jack and Clyde and Colin McNamara with Red up front and the same white players. I think that's how they'll start. They'll be nice and solid, and they'll want to be nice and solid from the start, and not to concede anything early and kind of build the way into the game.
That definitely will be interesting to see. And on a really positive note, Jason, like we were on about, the league taking shape towards the end of the second round of fixtures, maybe. Again, another positive for that victory was when you look at standings now, Treaty are 7 points clear of 6th position in the table, which is Athlone and Cabinteely together, I believe. As you also mentioned, then you have Athlone playing Cabinteely this week. So even allowing for worst case scenario when you're playing Shelburne and UCD, obviously UCD beating Treaty earlier in the year and Shelburne being as strong as they are, even allowing for the fact that if Treaty were to lose both of those games, chances are they're going to be going at least a point ahead of Athlone or Cabinteely into games against those teams. So it's a hugely important period, but very exciting to be in this position at all.
Well, it is, Adrian, and you asked me a couple of weeks ago, when would the players kind of start thinking about being in the playoffs and stuff like that? And because of the gap that's there now is the time that they will start thinking about it and discussing it between themselves. The players certainly, whatever about Tommy and Mike Shield and Mike McCarthy, they'll probably stick to the mantra that served them well so far. But the players now, after being in that position myself, you'd be looking at the table and you'd be kind of echoing what you just said there, that the gap is 7 points. That will totally take away the pressure, if there was any, for the Shelburne game, which should probably give an even better performance out of Treaty you'd expect. So they are probably looking at the playoffs now, the players certainly. And like you said, if the worst case scenario happens and they lose on Friday and they lose to UCD, they can still get back on the horse by beating Cabinteely and Athlone in them next series of games as well. So look, it's fantastic looking out, looking at it, and no one wants them to do as well as Noel, yourself and I. That's a certainty. And just back to the point that you made about the supporters, and if it was me, I'd be targeting the Blue Army lads to be in the ground on Friday night. If I had a choice to put 200 fans in there, I'd be leaning towards Kevin Kiley and Darnoon and getting their army together, I suppose, to fill that stand and be vocal, and that'll give the atmosphere that's required, because that's probably all that's missing, Adrian, really at the moment, isn't it? Is that buzz that they bring to the games, so be a little selective, I suppose, on who you leave in and things like that, and get the proper supporters into the ground to be vocal and behind the team.
Well, I know that it's all members as we speak, because we'll know more by Friday, I suppose. The club have well over 300, if not 400 members, so we'll see how it goes. But as we were speaking about there, Noel, it is something you twigged, and people will think we're mad in saying this, really, because Treaty are third right now. But obviously Galway now have come up into the four. They've 4 wins in a row. Looks like they're going to get into a playoff position. We also have Bray and UCD, who we've all echoed that we expect those teams probably to get into the top 5, which means that we're kind of saying that it's effectively between Treaty, Athlone and Cabinteely. I know kind of your views on Athlone, but going on points, you couldn't really look outside of those three anyway for that last playoff place.
Yeah, well, certainly for one of them. Yeah, I mean, Cabinteely have wobbled a bit now the last few weeks as well. You know, that's obviously a very big game for those teams. You know, we actually got to see the last 10 minutes of the Wexford Athlone game on Friday night. It was still 10 minutes to go when the game in Turnerstrass finished up, and it was 4-2 to Wexford at the time, and Athlone came back in and got 2 goals to make it 4-all. But then, you know, they must be desperately disappointed. Knowing you're 4-2 down and you come back and get a point, you'd feel good. But they've conceded 4 goals to Wexford. It's kind of doubled Wexford's season tally in terms of goals scored. And I'm sure they went down there more than expecting to get a win, even though they weren't in great form themselves. So a tricky couple of weeks, you know, for them. There's no doubt the Treaty are in pole position for one of those playoff places, and I doubt they're thinking in lines of that in terms of saying, well, you know, UCD and Bray are definitely in it, and we're going to be scrapping for the last one with Cabinteely and Athlone, because I don't think it'll be Treaty who'll be scrapping for that last place the way they're going. I mean, they got over next weekend now, and they've another run of games where they'll be looking to win and cement that place and not kind of be hanging on for that 5th playoff place. That's certainly the way it's looking now anyway.
Yeah, we'll be excited to see how that goes, and we'll go on to our usual kind of predictions, Jason. Now for the games, we spoke about Cabinteely and Athlone. That's a game which impacts Treaty, but not just Treaty, but both of those clubs more so than anything, an awful lot, because Athlone have been in really poor form, as we keep mentioning now for the last few weeks. This game, particularly for both sides, because both of them are in poor form. So how do you see this one going? Obviously very difficult to call.
Yeah, very difficult to call. And we see announced today that Brian O'Sullivan has gone in as first team coach / assistant manager with Athlone, Adrian. So maybe that will give him a little bit of change of focus. Graham Kane has stepped away from that position, so there was a void there to be filled. But Cabinteely, okay, they're having a wobble, but they're still very, very competitive, as we saw against Shelbourne last week. And it was only in the dying minutes, I suppose, that Shelbourne got the winner in OG. I did say last week that I thought Wexford could turn Athlone over. They came very, very close to it. So, look, I would be leaning towards Cabinteely. I'll be honest in that one. And ideally, you want to draw from a Treaty point of view. But Cabinteely aren't known for draws, as I say every week. So, if I'm going to put my head on the block, I'll go for Cabinteely, Adrian.
Noel, Cork City have a second consecutive home game against Bray Wanderers. What's your prediction for this one?
Yeah, another difficult game for them. It'll be. I think it'll be tense how they reacted to Friday night. I hope they haven't thrown in the towel as such. They certainly played well enough to trouble a lot of teams in the league. And Bray are one of those teams as well, like bar 1 or 2 matches, they haven't scored too many goals in games. So I'll put as Jason has put his head in the chopping block, I will as well, and I'll predict the Cork City win. I think they're probably due a win, and maybe with a small change of fortune, or if they have the right attitude and the right learnings, if you like, from last Friday, and they play as well as they did last Friday, I think that they have a decent chance of getting a home victory.
And two home victories so far. I don't know if that's going to change too much, Jason, considering the Galway form heading into Galway versus Cove. So how do you think Cove will fare out in Galway?
Yeah, Galway are on the crest of a wave. They've turned that corner that we all knew they would. The John Caulfield way is to win games, and he's certainly doing that now, adding clean sheets. And it's interesting, I suppose, listening to John saying that over the last number of weeks, there's a real togetherness in the team, and maybe that's giving a message to Shane Duggan, I suppose, that he's out of the team and they're doing so well. It's interesting sometimes what we can take from people's comments, but you couldn't be betting against Galway, Adrian. They're going to be good value for a win there.
Yeah, and finally in the league, you've got UCD facing Wexford. Noel, how do you think that one will fare? Again,
I think Wexford UCD haven't really been great since the break, but they're probably overdue a win. I think that they'll be good enough to beat Wexford on Friday night and get the wagon moving on again.
Yeah, it promises to be another exciting and unpredictable weekend in the First Division. Just to go off the Airtricity League for a moment, there was big news, Jason, in junior circles. just about 2 hours ago now, with the news that former Limerick FC manager, at Lone Town manager Mike Curley is going in as director of coaching with Aisling Anacotty, which is a role almost unheard of, I suppose, for junior football. Anacotty announced it a while ago. What do you make of the move and Curley's appointment in Anacotty?
Well, I'd like to know, I suppose, the parameters of the role, Adrian, before I comment too much. But look, looking at Mike's CV and knowing him and knowing his coaching qualifications and capabilities, I think it's a great appointment. You'd wonder, I suppose, at times what model Aisling Anacotty are moving forward with these days. It was obvious in the past that they wanted to bring through their own young players, I suppose. But when you look at some notable young players transferring out of the club to Fairview Rangers, namely Kennedy and Dip and Conor Coughlin, both very young players who came through the youth system at Aisling. When you see them departing, you kind of wonder why they're bringing in a director of coaching. And, there's no doubt, and as I said, Mike's ability, he was someone who would have loved to see involved with Treaty United, because I think that's his level, and you look at grassroots clubs at the moment, if you're bringing in a director of coaching, where are you producing players for? Is it League of Ireland? And without that club link, I suppose, between Treaty and Aisling Anacotty, the goals are going to be too beneficial for Aisling, But again, look, fantastic to see Mike back in the game. The game will certainly be better for him being involved, and I wish him well.
I know people have said in the past, for both yourself and Mike Curley, actually, that they were probably disappointed not to see you still involved in Electricity League football and flying the Limerick flag as such as well. Were you also of the same opinion? And I suppose, are you happy to see Mike Curley back involved in coaching at some level?
Yeah, it's great to see Mike back. I signed him back actually for Limerick. And just to bring a bit of experience, I remember him playing as what a player he was. He was very interested in the coaching side as well. And when I went to Cork, I recommended him for the job in Limerick, and a fine job he did, bringing Limerick into the playoffs the following season. Again, look, there's been so much good things that I can say about Aisling in terms of their underage and a lot of really good players. It's good that Mike is involved. I think, they have become his home club anyway. I think, he lives in the area. And I'm sure what they're looking to do now, because they've obviously have lost a few coaches, if you like. They're probably looking to develop coaches, within the club, because obviously some guys came in and, I know they had a kind of an academy going as well, an independent academy, and maybe they're looking to ring fence that, within their club, and for Mike to organise that and maybe to get more coaches in on the coaching ladder, which would be great for Limerick and underage soccer. Obviously, for me as well as the academy director of the Schoolboy League, you look around and you're looking for guys to get involved with academy teams. And if a club like Aisling are going to encourage guys to do their licenses and become more qualified, well then it can only be good for Limerick soccer as a whole.
Yeah, certainly. And we will be speaking more about obviously your own role, Noel, as well, with the Schoolboy League and the academy in the coming weeks. Jason, on a final note for us this evening, can't skip over the fact that Fairview Rangers have a big game on Saturday evening. They play Athenry in the FAI Senior Cup first round. It's funny, I do remember when Durham Finnan was in charge of Fairview, they had those shades against those teams. They actually beat Dublin City one year 4-1 in an FAI. It could have been a second or third round game. It was quite an important game. It's a big one for Fairview, obviously, as a club. It's going to be difficult considering the lack of preparation they probably feel they will have, despite playing a couple of friendlies, I believe. And it's a step up then, I suppose, but it'll be a step up they'll want to have to try and get and play in our Electricity League side and further on in the competition. Oh,
definitely, Adrian. They've earned the right, obviously, to be there. FAI Junior Cup champions, and the work the club has done off the pitch. The Fair Green looks fantastic these days. There's a stand, there's dugouts and the floodlights, and it's a testament to Derek White and Hughie Brogan and the committee up there. They're doing fantastic work, and look, no better man to lead them on the pitch than Jason Purcell. Again, someone I've great time for and great respect for, and his achievements in the game speak for themselves. And I mentioned Conor Coughlin and Kennedy and Dip, Two very, very good acquisitions for them. They still obviously have AJ O'Connor and Ross Mann and Jamesy Fitz, and even Jamesy Fitz's younger brother Keane is definitely worth a mention, and Connor Keane. They're two young players that have been at Fairview for a while, and they'll come to the fore over this season and next season, hopefully. You know, occasions like these are to be enjoyed, but they'll want to get over it, Adrian, and they'd love nothing more, I suppose, than get one of the big names, you know, at home in a round or two's time. But yeah, fantastic work been up there. I think they're short to centre forward myself, but they're difficult to find at the moment. But be a fantastic occasion for the club, and I hope they do it.